All right, I'm starting the recording. Good evening, everyone. It's about 6:35 p.m. on April 13th, 2021. Welcome to Manhattan Community Board 3's Transportation, Public Safety, and Environment Committee meeting for the month of April. My name is Paul Rangel. I am the chair of the committee. We have a lengthy agenda tonight, and it's going to start with the approval of minutes to the entire committee that is on right now. Are there any objections to the minutes?
Paul, do you want me to go over the Zoom guidelines? Sorry, I forgot to share it.
Oh, crap.
And there's Philip Ellison, who's joining now.
I'm on fire. Go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. Just a reminder about Zoom guidelines. The chat will only be going to me, the host. So please only use it for, and that's per CB3 guidelines. Please use it only for any technical issues you have, like if you're having trouble raising your hand or something like that. And also the other important thing is that when the agenda item comes up that you want to speak on, please raise your hand. And also if everyone could just sign into the chat right now with your name and if appropriate, your affiliation. And if you want to speak on it and on any of the items, but we'll also ask you to raise your Zoom hands when that item comes up, just so we make sure that you still want to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so let's get going. Committee, any objections to the minutes? I sent out the minutes last night from March's meeting. Any objections to the minutes or any corrections or adjustments that need to be made? We got a thumbs up. Good all over the place. Good. Going once, twice, 3 times sold. Great. Wendy, attendance.
Paul Rangel?
Yes, here.
Michelle Cooper-Smith?
Yes, here.
Wendy Lee, yes. Lee Berman?
Yes.
David Crane?
Yes.
Felicia Cruikshank? Felicia? I don't see her.
I doubt she'll be on. I doubt it.
Ellen Lowe?
I don't see her either.
Okay. And Tariq Ramos?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're not missing anybody. Okay, I think we got everyone. All right. So we do have a lengthy agenda. I think I saw Philip on from the Public Advocate's office. Am I correct? I think I saw him get on. So we're going to start with agenda item number 2, is Advocacy for community and businesses regarding open restaurants implementation and enforcement. This is an item that came up, or topic that came up last month at our committee meeting about the role that the Public Advocate's Office may have in the open restaurant program and its enforcement. And we want to thank Philip Ellison from the Public Advocate's Office for coming on today, potentially taking our questions. And so, Philip, I'm going to lead off with you. You can introduce yourself and let us know the role of the Advocate's Office throughout this open restaurants and anything open streets related.
Good afternoon, CB3. Pleasure to join you. Thank you to Susan for reaching out and being an accessible advocate for your community. It's a little grounding. I'm the Manhattan Borough Advocate and the liaison to the Technology, Data, and Development team. I am the one Manhattan-based person, and I do lead citywide projects as well. In the pandemic, we're a bit understaffed, but a mighty office under Jamani Williams. And I put expectation here to kind of be here and listen. I had an introductory conversation with Susan, who shared some information, but really could commit to being a listening board to take additional information, additional perspectives on the gaps that are existing. There are people on the back end of my office trying to get a better understanding of, and Susan did a great job, but just want to hear directly to take some notes back and information back to the office to best understand, how can we, whether behind the scenes or in a way, be supportive in this, and who are the right people, before some of this gets enshrined in a way. A bit more about the office. I think when people see ombudsman in the language, the Public Advocate's Office, some people I understand are connected to politics or have been on a community board for a long while. Sometimes the iteration of different public advocates, it changes, it evolves. Like a different mayor might institute something. For example, people don't know this, but some of my own research, I'm a fellow at Cornell Tech. Good example, is the Manhattan Borough President, Wagner in the 60s is the one that created kind of the iteration of community boards as we see it. And eventually when he became mayor, he scaled that to citywide. That's some contextual history. So when you look at my office, under Jamani Williams, really has the name of an advocate. I would say something obviously for folks who are forgotten in the city, marginalized, and or just not having a voice at the table, particularly when it comes to the mayor. We sometimes work with the mayor behind the scenes or publicly. And can you still hear me by chance? My internet was unstable. Can you still hear me? Great. So
Doing fine.
Thank you. Sorry about that. The internet said the internet wasn't. A good example is, today I was with the Public Advocate and a number of gun violence prevention advocates thinking around the summer. And that was something that the mayor's office, given some of the work we were doing and pushing earlier, the mayor's office came around and supported, right? We sometimes work together. Sometimes we're pushing the mayor outwardly, or oftentimes outwardly where there's gaps. And so I think for here, it's an opportunity again, and I'll close by this introductory piece here, is an opportunity to take back some information. We do look at government agencies and make recommendations and advocate as well. But it's a good sense to better understand the landscape of the issues around open streets, both in the community side and the business side around this enforcement, and see if we can be of value there.
Thank you, Philip. I appreciate you making that explanation. So for the committee, I know the committee had some questions about the role of the Public Advocate's Office and open restaurants and open restaurants enforcement. So I'm not going to ask anything right now. So I'll take any questions from the committee. Lee, I know you may have had a question. I'm going to just go right to you to start.
Thanks, Paul. Well, from those that may remember the discussion at last month's meeting, so many community groups and folks advocating for open restaurants were explaining how they were getting hit by so many different agency rules and agency visits, and that there appeared to be no cohesive agency or body that had all the rules in one place, so that a business owner was able to abide by a written set or a set of rules compiled in one place. And I and others were hoping that the Public Advocate's Office could be that central hub for representing all the city agencies and making sure that the businesses who are trying to stay in business, who are trying to exist and just stay afloat, could rely on the Public Advocate's Office to intercede on their behalf with the myriad city agencies that are coming down and enforcing rules and creating new ones, sometimes on a daily basis, etc. So I'd really like to know, Philip, how you can help the small businesses, those restaurants that are trying to remain afloat while facing what they're facing with the variety of agencies that are coming in with enforcement, etc.
Yeah, Lee, well, one, I would love to, I first want to say thank you for sharing that. And I'm actively taking notes here. And Susan's provided some example, especially even the kind of subtle racialization for like looking at Chinatown and the businesses and how they were being enforced, and not really taking the kind of diversity context here as like a tangible example. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about the kind of getting hit by different agencies and rules, where I do think and I can't commit in regards, but when I'm thinking about the office, right, when we talk about making recommendations, there's also, there's a piece where we can make recommendations, to the mayor or local government agencies. And we also do have legislative powers. We introduce legislation. So actually the public advocate's office has actually had the most legislation passed of any public advocate. We introduce, and there are folks who take on some of our legislative pieces and implement them, right? And so I think those are possibly, we can see, there's the public route, there's the route of the recommendation to an agency, and then there's the route of legislation. Those, I think, are just 3 examples of possible ways. I'm hearing the centralization, the hub, and the advocacy for businesses. When you, and correct me or my language here, when would you say that kind of need for when if there's no centralized hub as exists now, and when number of agencies and rules are getting are kind of affecting some of these small businesses, that's a kind of a crisis point when you feel like there's a need for an advocate on that side.
Absolutely, and I think, Susan, if you could step in here as well. I mean, you were the point person for so many of the business entities who, if I remember correctly, as you described, there was a case where one business reached out to you where an inspector came in and asked for a particular type of plan, and they had asked the cleaning person, who may not have been speaking English well or understood the inspector, yet the plan was right there, but that particular person wasn't responsible for the plan. The plan was there, and yet they were still hit with a violation. Things like that. So I'm sure Susan could certainly.
Yeah, I actually gave Philip those very specific examples, and we have since heard from the Chinatown Partnership bid that is commonplace in Chinatown, and it's very much also an issue of language. So you have somebody who's working there but not responsible for any type of management, trying to deal with these issues when they're not speaking the same language. And then also very much situation where people are in a political situation where they're accustomed to fearing government and inspectors. So that certainly impacts them. I will say, from working with many businesses in many of these areas, sometimes a very common complaint is that people are not told when there is an inspection, when they're not in compliance. A very common thing, and I think Jennifer's on here and she's heard me talk about this a long time from DOT. Well, someone will come in and they're inspecting, say, the roadbed, but they're not telling people, we're only inspecting the roadbed. So when they say everything's fine, the business or the restaurant thinks everything's fine and doesn't realize that 50% of what they're doing is out of compliance. They don't get fined at this point. They don't get fined for that, but it's very confusing. You will probably see every time you walk out in the street, somebody building an expensive wood structure in the roadway. I don't know that those are going to be legal in 2 months, but nobody's telling people not to spend money on them. So I think particularly the group that was here last month, what they were looking for is there is no one that's in charge. There is no oversight whatsoever. And it's also the public. So you have both small businesses and the public saying, we don't understand the rules. There's no monitoring. They may be enforced on that block and not on that block. It's a mess. It's just a mess. The program, I think people are very happy with the program, although I think there's so many problems that it's affecting getting people angry. There, I've heard people are actually suing to stop the program. That's certainly not the view on this board, but there needs to be someone that both businesses and public can go to that actually monitor and have capability of oversight. And I will say, just I'm going to add to this, I know some of the agencies are very, very frustrated in what they can or can't do.
Okay. I'm just actively taking notes here. If you're looking at me looking down.
It's okay. I could talk for 2 hours on this. Unfortunately, it's taken over the lives of many of us.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate a little bit, you know, getting back to that example that you gave here, and then I know the roadway piece, and there was the name of the group was I know it's a Chinatown related group.
The Chinatown Core, it's a Black association. It's called Chinatown Core. They particularly came to the last meeting, but in January we had a town hall on this issue with over 100 people, and these are the same complaints you will hear from various boards and from many areas.
And have they been sending you? I know they came to us last. Have they sent any formalized complaints? Of course, we'd love to check in with the city councilman in the area, Ms. Chen, and other fries. But have they sent you formal? I understand they went to the town hall. They were in this meeting here with you all. I'm just understanding just for a back end piece.
I mean, the community groups or businesses. I made a complaint to DOB about a specific inspection, and they did go back and review it and came back and told me basically, so the inspection happened before the restaurant was even officially open. And, you know, I said, you came in, the owner wasn't there, and they came back and said, the restaurant doesn't have to be open to be inspected. That was their answer after, you know, giving these very specific complaints. You know, I suspect that when we fight this at oath, that it will not hold up. But yes, I made an official complaint to an agency about it. And I've made many complaints about I made a complaint about, for a very specific restaurant that had both passed inspection and failed inspection. And I will say that I took to DOT and they were very helpful and had me help me take care of it. And it turned out the restaurant was fine. The person who said it didn't pass inspection did not carry the day. But yeah, I follow through. You know, I follow through with agencies all the time.
Less about your follow through, Susan. Just in case if I wanted to ask and inquire for some of those other formal complaints, other than the examples you gave. Is there any? I don't know. Is there anything else here? I think what I can, you know, there was a little bit more questions on the back end again internally in our office. But I do think there are recommendation mechanisms and legislative mechanisms. I can't say, but I think those are possibilities and potential avenues. I think I can go back, and it'd be great to be connected to the Chinatown Core Block Association possibly as well. And it seems to be there's kind of a how should we say discrepancy around enforcement on the other side. I know Susan gave me one example around a TV on the street and who's supposed to enforce that, you know, when in our open streets program. But there's a discrepancy between where there's enforcement and where there's not enforcement. Those are kind of like top line thoughts. I'm wondering if there's anything else around this, at least in this issue, because I knew they wanted me to come back with this information.
I was going to say, I, you know, just to finish up, I think a lot of people get away with non-compliance, and I think more vulnerable communities get hit more with violations. And I'll be happy to connect you after the meeting with the Chinatown Core.
All right. Thank you, Susan. I see David Grant's had his hand up.
Okay. Yeah, so after the January town hall, TV3 actually followed up and passed a resolution titled Open Street Restaurants. in which you're trying to address, as I said in the agenda, to address various issues, including enforcement and agency coordination and community input. So, Philip, did you know about the resolution, and were you able to read it?
He hasn't.
I have.
Has it? Okay. So I would encourage, it's pretty long. It's nearly 2,500 words, so we can't go through it tonight. But I would encourage you to read it and help craft the possible solutions. It's 2,400 words. It went into quite a lot of detail, and I really think it lays out the issues. Thanks.
Thank you.
Committee.
I can't raise my hand, Paul, but
Go ahead,
I
Michelle.
just have one thing, which it's not even just that it's a central, I don't know, Susan, if you don't agree with this, but it's not just that there's no centralized
Michelle,
place
you're
to do
breaking up.
enforcement.
Michelle, you were breaking up. You can hear you now, but you're breaking up for a second.
Okay. I don't know if it's just that there's no centralized place for enforcement, but it's also that it doesn't seem like there's any place for enforcement. Like I emailed Susan earlier today about a place that is clearly not abiding by the outdoor like rules in terms of like one long side open, one short side open. And it's like, there just doesn't seem to be a place to adjudicate that. And it's like, why would you follow the rules if you don't have to? And moreover, that the rules have shifted a lot. And if you even go to like the DOT website, like, I mean, it is dense, the things that you need to follow. And it's not laid out in any sort of user-friendly way. So it's not just that, to me, that there's no centralized place, just that this is not communicated well, and like no one wants to do anything to oversee it. Anyone.
So what I would say, that would go back to, it depends where you live, and that goes back to non-enforcement in many, many issues, but then unfair enforcement in vulnerable communities. And part of what you're looking at is, Michelle, the kinds of things you're talking about are Department of Transportation, and they do not enforce on those issues. And Department of Buildings does enforce, and they're the ones that are actually giving the violations in the immigrant communities.
Susan, can you say that first part again? I heard the last part on DOB is enforcing in immigrant.
DOT actually is generally not enforcing. And those are the issues that Michelle is talking about. But they're also in Community Board 3. Those are the issues that are not among the most vulnerable businesses who may have undocumented workers out in front dealing with inspectors or that sort of thing. They're more the businesses that are actually doing well.
Give me the example of the business doing well. I understand the businesses and the businesses that you
Well,
sort of
we actually,
undocumented workers. I get that kind of the equity piece there.
I mean, we actually have a number of businesses in this community, and this being written about, the return to business or reopening is very uneven around the city. And in this area, we actually have a number of businesses that are doing well. And the example Michelle was giving was, someone, I think, with their huge structure in the roadbed, and the issue there is public health. They're supposed to have these open structures that allow people to eat outdoors, and instead they're creating indoor structures in the street, which is against all the COVID regulations.
Okay.
Committee, have any other questions? All right, Philip, this is one's from me. I just have a few. How comfortable with the advocate's office do you know yet, if there's something you had to take back, would be in being this one central location for hearing complaints or anything like that, or overseeing anything? I know the staff is small and whatnot, and this is a pretty big program, but how comfortable would the advocate's office be in being that representative and being that overseer?
Yeah, I can't particularly come in and commit that. I think this gives us a lot of, and you heard, and I heard in your question, saying understanding the context that you added in your question around, the staff and capacity, the number of issues. But I do think there's veins in here that, themes in here that fall in line around equity, around access, around recommendations and improvement, around transparency. There are, we think the type of businesses and the violations. So I think I'm not, I personally don't know if our office is the one necessarily to centralize all those things, but potentially our office could be the one to make those recommendations, or maybe can be a part of bringing stakeholders together, et cetera. Like those are all possibilities, but again, I'd have to go back and talk with the different, right? So a little bit of on the structure. Again, a lot of people don't. I always enjoy explaining our office, partly because it allows you to use us, right? You are using us for the public good. That's what it's intended for, and people, we're still getting people to understand what the public advocacy office does, or what does the iteration look like. So, for a little additional context, you have the public advocate, obviously Jamani Williams. You have a deputy public advocate, Nick Smith, who's been at different facets of government, and the mayor's office and legislative and advocacy. And so he's the deputy public advocate. And then we have a kind of a deputy public advocate of community engagement. Of course, we have a policy and a legislative shop, and we have a communications and public affairs kind of intergov public facing shop. But most relevant for folks to understand is that in the community engagement team, unit, we have deputy public advocates and community organizers under them. So issue area experts, whether a civic empowerment and around thinking around, some of these issues affecting immigrant communities, undocumented people, obviously like civic when we think about voting, a deputy public advocate on environment and infrastructure justice, who's a former engineer, et cetera, as well as a very involved person in the community. We also have a education and deputy public advocate and community organizer of education opportunity, everything from K through 12 to lifelong learning, and deputy public advocate of health equity and justice. All right, and so this is one of those topics that touches on a number of areas and likely a number of departments. So I've really got to come and bring this back to a host of people.
Copy. No, I figured as much. I just wanted to put it out there.
Just using it to help people understand.
So just in that same breath, as in the push to make this permanent, and I believe it's already been made permanent, Susan, correct? It's like supposed to start in September.
The program has been made permanent, but none of the details have been made permanent yet. And we're hoping, and this public advocate could come in here, we're hoping that this is not done without input from the community.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing we probably want is, as a community board, is to have a lot of input on the way the implementation of this program is put together, since it's already on full steam ahead to be made permanent. So I think that's the one thing we probably want the most, is to have as much input as we possibly can, because we are the ones who are seeing this and dealing with it on a daily basis. So maybe my question here is, in this push to make it permanent and trying to get the details, has City Council reached out for the public advocates assistance or counsel on any of these issues so far?
Not to my knowledge, but you can't. I wouldn't say don't quote me. Again, not to my knowledge, that didn't come up in conversation, and I would want to reach out. I haven't yet to potentially to talk with city councilwomen, et cetera. But no, to my knowledge, no. But I wouldn't give that a final say.
Okay, I think what I would like from not asking you to make a commitment today, but maybe from our end, and maybe it's just something we could put a resolution together for, or a separate agenda item down in months to come, before, I guess, September. I think September is the deadline. Is that this is going to happen, Susan? Am I correct?
That's when it becomes permanent.
Permanent?
The new
Yeah.
program becomes
Right.
permanent.
And trying to figure out these details, I think we would want the support of the Public Advocate's Office as much as we can possibly get in having the community get say in this program, in the details and how it's enforced and whatnot. So we would love the support of the Public Advocate's Office in doing that as an extra layer of support, not just the community board saying this, but Public Advocate's Office is supporting the community board 3 or 2 or whoever is saying anything. If that's something you can take back to Mr. Williams and crew. Committee members, any other questions? Crickets. All right, Michelle, is there anybody who signed up for this item from the public in the chat
Well, I think we should just ask people to raise their hands
at this
if
point?
there's anyone, but I don't know. We haven't kind of beat this to death. We spent a lot of time on this.
We did. I'll take a few, very few questions from the public because I do want to. We do have another
Okay.
presentation
All
from
time.
DOT.
All time. Okay.
All right. I see 2 hands, and I'm gonna stick with that. I see Daniel. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yes, this is Daniel Tanow, a resident of Rivington Street, and I expressed a lot of opinions about having to do something, especially about the restaurants that have closed at the open house, or not the open house, but at the town hall, about the open streets, about who's going after the landlord or the businesses that closed but left their trash collecting open restaurants behind, as well as possibly charging the restaurants for open space once they're at full capacity indoors, and then they're just using the city's public space. But as far as the public advocate, I would suggest this is a good opportunity to introduce legislation that's been promoted by the Municipal Art Society to have a city agency or a mayor's office or whatever it comes down to of open space that could help coordinate all of these rules for open streets as for the restaurants and the people, as well as yeah, I think that's that it's a good opportunity to do that. Oh, as well as taking putting DOT having officers that are not NYPD, and they would be the perfect people to enforce these laws because they're happening on the streets, and the DOT has the expertise in how to manage that. Thanks.
Thank you. Philip, I know you diligently got that down. All right. All right, let me see one other hand. Is that Stuart? Yeah. Go ahead, Stuart. You got 2 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would echo what Paul said originally, which is that I would hope that the public advocate advocates for the public. We have a serious oversaturation problem in Community Board 3. The idea of having permanent outdoor drinking is unacceptable in our district. We already have a problem with operators and residents not being able to sleep, with streetscape being unruly and serious quality of life problems. It seems that the mayor is going to change the zoning language in order to skirt this and push it through. And we feel like we are being railroaded into a way of life that we do not want. It seems that the rest of the city that does not have small streets and lots of restaurants and lots of bars has no problem with this. And I say, then have open restaurants in those areas. We have serious drinking problems in our neighborhood, and we would like the public advocate to know that and to advocate for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. All right. So Philip, thank you for coming on today. If the committee has any final questions, this would be the time. If not, if you just take all of that back, and we appreciate you coming on and taking time out of your schedule to be with us tonight at Transportation, and take all this information back as we continue to tackle this issue pretty much every month.
Appreciate it. I thank you and Susan for reaching out. And Susan, thank you for your accessibility. Good to be with you all, and I appreciate the information and some of the details. I'll go back and work with Susan, etc., and be in conversation and collaboration and see where they land on this. But I'm glad to be here with you, and I hope you all have a wonderful night, and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Philip, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. All right. So that's item number 2. Item number 3. DOT is on. I know there's several people on from DOT for the Avenue C bike lane presentation. Just to refresh everyone's memory, I believe it was back in December, the DOT presented on the potential protected bike lane coming to Avenue C. We had asked in our resolution that they'd come back after having spoken with or reached out to the businesses. I believe they will be presenting about that and the resident outreach, all that good stuff. I have Kimberly is on, right?
Yeah, I can kick it off.
And there's a few who are presenting?
Yeah, so I'm Kimberly from the Manhattan office at DOT, and we also have Jennifer here from our office, and then from the bike team we have Ted Wright, Eileen Body, and Olgwayne Alcee. And so yeah, thanks for having us back tonight to give you these updates. Over the winter, we conducted some outreach along the corridor, and we've been working to refine the design, specifically around the loading zones for the businesses and around the open restaurants. So Olgwayne's gonna do the presentation tonight, and she will share those updates with you. And just to give the update on the open restaurants a little bit, at this time we plan to accommodate the roadway seating in all of the existing open restaurants this spring, so that we can help to continue supporting these businesses and the recovery. But as you all know, and as you were just discussing in great detail, this project, the program, the Open Restaurants program, is continuing to evolve. And so for the time being, this is our approach, and we'll keep working with the restaurants and the community as changes are made to the program. Owen, actually, did you want to wrap up the presentation? I forgot the.
Would I be able to get screen sharing abilities from the host?
Shall you able to have a share?
Thank you. Is everyone able to see this query?
Yes.
All good, all good.
The other, as she kicks that off, the other background pieces that we had were just kind of some other context, because we know there's a lot going on in the neighborhoods. So we also wanted to let you know that we plan to come back hopefully this spring with some updates on the bus priority improvements on the branches of the 14th M14 SBS A and D that we talked about back when we were looking at the 14th Street busway. So we'll be doing that hopefully in the coming months. And then the other item, are you flipping, Olgwayne, or is it?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Like, where's my cues? And then the last one is the Avenue B open street that we know there's also been a lot of interest in and conversations around. And so we are still talking about potential upgrades and changes there as we move towards future.
So moving a bit into the proposal here. So this provides a look at the project location. And what you can see here on the map here is the highlighted route in purple. And so again, the proposed route will work with the protected bike lanes on East Houston Street to fill the gaps in the East Village protected bike lane network. And the route will also establish a direct connection to the existing bike network at 20th Street and serve as a detour for the cyclists during the ESCR project. So again, in terms of safety, protected bike lanes provide traffic calming, dedicated space for cyclists, and better pedestrian crossings. And both routes also build on the Green Wave plan to build 30 miles of protected bike lanes annually and expand the citywide protected bike lane network. So that's just a bit on the location and details. So the next few slides will go into details of our design along Avenue C. And you'll see that there's some variation in design by block due to the number of competing uses along the corridor. And while refining our design, we needed to consider the open restaurants, the frequent bus stops, as well as the cyclists who are already using this as a north-south route and those who will be diverted by the detour. So starting at the southernmost segment of Avenue C between East Houston Street and East 3rd Street, the shown cross sections provide a look at the existing conditions and our proposal. So something to note on that top cross section is that currently cyclists are being directed to share the space with vehicles, and the width of the roadway here is especially constrained, and the existing parking and travel lanes are narrower than our standards. So in this proposal on the bottom, we would improve the conditions here by repurposing the parking along the stretch to provide a dedicated space for cyclists along both curbs, as well as to standardize the travel lane widths. And so moving further along on Avenue C, the design changes between East 3rd and East 10th Street. Currently on this stretch, we have standard bicycle lanes, as well as those narrower non-standard vehicle and parking lane widths. And so with this project, we would standardize the lane widths and provide curbside bike lanes. And there is some variation in the design here with the occurrence of the bus stops. The first proposed, or rather the second cross section shown on the slide, would be the conditions in which bus stop on one side of the street. So in those cases, we provide a curbside bike lane on each side, but maintain loading on the opposing side where we do not need to accommodate buses. So on blocks with bus stops on both curbs, we'd employ the last cross section shown here. And although the remaining space with this cross section does not provide for floating parking, we do have the 11-foot clearance necessary for curbside maintenance. And therefore we would include quick curb and delineators to provide further separation between cyclists and the moving vehicles. So between 10th and 13th Street, the roadway widens considerably again. So in this area, we would upgrade the existing buffered bike lanes to provide curbside bike lanes protected by floating parking or delineators according to the locations of the bus stops, since as I pointed out before, we would need to accommodate this. So also shown here in this cross section in yellow are painted pedestrian islands. This would be installed in feasible locations to cross in the pedestrian distances at the intersections. And lastly, something to note is that out of that initiative for improving bus travel times in the Lower East Side, we worked with our transit planning group to improve bus travel times by providing a new southbound left turn bay at 10th Street. So for the last block within CB3, between East 13th and East 14th, the road narrows once more, and we are again more constrained in terms of space. So here, we would upgrade the existing bicycle lane and make them curbside. And similar to 10th Street, we would also provide a new northbound left turn bay at 14th Street as part of those bus improvements. So the map shown here provides a broad overview of the corridor in terms of design. And as you can see, the design varies from delineator protected to parking protected and curbside due to the transitions that are necessary for accommodating the buses. Next, we'll talk a little bit about our outreach to businesses along this corridor. This winter, our street ambassadors surveyed businesses along the corridor to acquire data for their operations and their deliveries. This included the frequency of their deliveries, time of day, and also reports of double parking. And then we used this data to refine our design by creating a loading zone plan that accommodates some of that reported usage along the corridor. And to summarize some of the findings of that survey, we found that 88% of businesses along Avenue C do not control when they receive deliveries, as most of those deliveries are coordinated by third-party private vendors. And so the photo on the right here shows a cargo delivery bike operating on Avenue C. And this also mirrors our survey findings that of the 45% of businesses along Avenue C that do deliver to customers, 70% of them deliver on bikes. Next here, the bar chart that's shown at the bottom takes a closer look at the frequency of those incoming deliveries to businesses along Avenue C on weekdays versus weekends. And we found that businesses on both sides of the street reported expecting deliveries at least twice on a typical weekday. So from some of those findings that we got from that survey, we put together a loading plan utilizing those data points obtained from the businesses about when they're receiving deliveries. And so the map shown here highlights the street regulation changes for loading along the corridor. The orange locations indicate the blocks where we would update the existing AS alternate side parking to include commercial loading Monday through Friday, 7 to 5. But we would also include neighborhood loading zones on the side streets, which are shown here in blue on the map. This would involve providing 2 to 3 spaces per zone on the block ends to accommodate deliveries and smaller vehicles not captured by the loading zones on Avenue C. And outside of those commercial loading hours and the no parking hours, vehicle parking would be maintained. And so the neighborhood loading zones are a little bit more flexible in that they could be adjusted to meet any observed demand or loading concerns. And the commercial loading zones are a little bit more limited to where floating parking is feasible along the corridor. Next, I guess we'll touch a little bit on our accommodations for open restaurants along Avenue C. The map shown here highlights the existing open restaurants along the stretch. The blue locations on the map would be accommodated in our proposed design. And we would do this by relocating the existing restaurant seating into the floating parking lane as shown in the bottom left cross section. However, when you move a little bit north along the corridor between 7th and 9th Street, currently there is restaurant seatings on both sides of the street. And given that our proposed design for this area would not accommodate restaurants on both sides of the street due to the conflicting bus stops and variations in floating parking, we would look to maintain the existing markings temporarily. Instead of asking cyclists to shift from the proposed curbside lane to the vehicle lane and then back to the curb to get around the restaurants, cyclists would be able to completely avoid having to navigate around the restaurant seating and instead continue straight until the bike lane returns to the curbside. So in terms of next steps, this spring and summer 2021, we would work to provide additional outreach to businesses, and hopefully begin implementation of Avenue C and the East Houston protected bike lanes. Thank you.
It's a lovely end slide. Questions? That's usually my cue. All right. Before I start, I'm gonna have the committee ask any questions.
I can't raise my hand, but I have I have a question just generally about the bus situation. So am I understanding this right that so basically the bus will just cross like, where does the bus go? I guess I'm a little confused
So-
on the proposed.
In the scenarios where the curbside bike lane overlaps with the buses, buses
Uh-huh.
would be allowed to pull into the curb, but the markings would indicate to cyclists that they're being asked to transition around the bus stops.
So they'll have to go into traffic, basically?
When the bus is stopped in the stop, but otherwise they could continue straight.
And how many bus stops are there, and how frequently do the buses go down Avenue C?
I would.
I'm going to answer this one.
Right.
The
Yeah, Paul's a
M14 makes,
lifelong Avenue C resident, so
So this-
you're contending
yeah,
with an
right.
expert here.
M14 makes a lot of turns on 10th and C both ways, going south and going north. And that's a wide turn it has to make, as well as the M9 that goes up Avenue C straight up from Houston all the way up to 23rd and then makes its turn. That's going to be quite dangerous when the 14 makes its turn. Either way, it's dangerous now. Now putting it in that bike lane might be, it's going to be tricky for that. It's that big accordion bus. It's not a small bus on that 14.
Right.
So it's going to be tough.
Are the bicyclists going to have a stoplight at those corners when they don't have the light? Like
No,
when
we
there's a
would-
turn from the main?
We wouldn't typically install a signal at the bus stop, but something to note about that turn at 14th Street is that we did work with Transit Planet to make sure to include a turn bay for that. So it wouldn't necessarily be a conflict to cyclists.
What about?
And that's also
10th Street might be the
statistically,
conflict. 10th Street might be
Sorry.
the conflict.
sorry to chime in
Sorry,
really
just to
quickly.
add,
When you have a turn
Okay.
bay, that does make it safer. And there is an existing bike lane there, so everybody understands that, and it's the same conflict that's there. We can't alleviate everything with a protected bike lane, so everybody understands that.
and just to add as well, the bus stop design of pulling to the curb and the cyclists going around the buses is very similar to the current existing condition for how the bike lanes that are there now interact with the bus stops.
Doesn't mean it's a safe or good way for a bike lane to operate though. And my follow-up question to that is, why are they delineated or protected so delineated or protected is only on the places where there are bus stops. Is that accurate? Just if you go
No.
rush sorry.
The delineator
other side.
protection in this case would be on the opposing side where we don't have to drop away the cyclists for the bus stop. This would just be for the areas where it's feasible and we can still provide the 11-foot clearance for maintenance.
I see. So why can't it be a real delineator instead of, sorry, I should like a concrete delineator or something that actually protects cyclists? I mean, people are just going to drive over those things. That's what happens on Clinton Street, which is where I live nearby. I don't see, like, we have an opportunity to make actually protected bike lanes. Like, has that been, I brought this up, I'm sure the last time we talked about this, has that been considered?
So what we mentioned earlier is that we'll be using some delineators, but also quick curb, which is more continuous and has that continuous curb at the base. So that would look a little bit different than Clinton Street. Something else to note is just the width that some of the concrete barriers can take up. We do need to maintain 11 feet of clearance between the curb and the protection material in order for the plows and the street sweepers to pass through. So in this scenario, with some of those narrower bollards like the quick curb and the delineators do fit here. We are exploring and researching new materials, but they're not available at this time for this project just yet.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just want to register that I think, like, if we're building new bike lanes, we should make bike lanes that actually protect the cyclists. Like, why are we doing ones that cars will just drive over, which is what happens on 12th Street as well. It's just, they're not protected bike lanes if they're flexible delineators. They're just not. Anyway, I will stop because I've taken your time, but I think you got my position on it. Thanks for presenting.
Thank you, Michelle. I see two hands. I see David Crane and then I see Susan.
Yeah, I cycle a lot, and so I'm basically speaking to what happens with the bus when there is not these like nice green, bike lanes that are painted and often protected. So when there's more, currently there's a shared lane and there's a parking lane, and the bus will turn over into the parking lane. The shared lane is, you don't have to deviate to go around it. I'm trying to picture a place where there is a bus that pulls into and parks across a green lane? I can't, because generally these are on one-way avenues, so maybe you don't have an example of one.
Do we have the diagram? So when we were here in the fall, we actually shared the overhead view of what those bus stops look like that are following the example that we've installed on Central Park West. So you can see sort of a schematic view here of what it would look like. So it's different.
Yeah, you got
There's
a nice
definitely-
bus that's right up to the curb, I see. So, you know, I look at that and I'm thinking I would be able to negotiate that. You know, it happens all the time when I'm on a regular street without bike lanes that there's a conflict with a bus, and I generally pull over and wait.
And I'll just add in that one of the engineering considerations that we do pay attention to on this that will make you happy, it's not just like a normal street. We do make sure that there's a lot of width there. We make sure that I believe it's 12-foot minimum, which is actually quite substantial, enough for you to get around the bus. So it's not ideal, but the bus still needs to get to the curb. You know, there's a lot of things that we can do capitally, and it's definitely something that we're working through on projects. But this has actually become a lot more as we've expanded protected bike lanes off of just Manhattan avenues. You actually see this a lot more now in like 9th Street, Central Park West, anywhere where it's slightly narrow. These are starting to pop up more often, and it's not ideal, but we do have an engineering standard, just so you understand that. I think that's.
Yeah, well, I'm saying especially if that's 12 foot from curb to the dotted line there, the dashed line, I think that you've done pretty well here.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the loading zones. And you mentioned, or there was mentioned several times about the neighborhood loading zones, except we don't know what they are because we've been asking DOT to come present on that. And even this morning, I asked Jennifer to please come in May and talk about it. Loading zones have been a big issue. We have a lot of complaints, growing complaints in the area about bus stops are being used on the avenues and on streets, like particularly 10th Street, where it's Amazon or UPS or, you know, other suppliers that are just kind of taking over. So we need to resolve it. And I would think that we would want to do it on Avenue C in a coordinated way with the whole area. And I think it would be really important for DOT to come talk to us about what neighborhood loading zones are and how they would help us.
Just to say that part of where neighborhood loading zones came from is a little bit of what the bike team has been doing for years, where whenever we put in protected bike lanes, we like to take a look at existing loading regs and try to make them fit in a little bit better so we have less double parking. I will let Kim speak to the neighborhood loading zones in particular, but I think that's for this commercial corridor, we've worked directly with parking, and this is almost a step above what you'll see as far as neighborhood loading zones.
What I would like to ask for is to come next month and talk about it so we could look at it in a unified manner for the area, not just Avenue C, without looking at Avenue B or 10th Street or 12th Street, that kind of thing.
Totally understand.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying for sure. And maybe Jen wants to chime in as well. But I think just to bring back to this project, these are installed or like located specifically in places that we think there would need to be loading where we won't have that curb access on Avenue C. So I think these are a really critical piece of this project, but we should definitely be looking at them together. So even if we're moving this forward, I think we would want to look at the other streets.
Thank you.
Combination.
Thank you.
I'm glad that this slide is up because I keep looking at the commercial loading zone for 4th Street on C. Those trucks that come in for shop fare, which is that green store in the second picture, those trucks are huge and they take up pretty much the entire block, and it's even tough for the M9 bus to get through. And I know we're there's proposal to make these changes in the protected bike lanes. That's close to impossible. Those trucks are huge when they come in, and they come in at any time of day. They're normally there early in the morning, 7:30, already doing their deliveries, and they're on both sides of the street, on 4th Street and on 3rd. They take up a lot of real estate on that block. So I'm just giving you that heads up that when those trucks come through, it's tough enough for cars and bikes and buses to get through now. It's going to be even tougher once this bike lane project comes to fruition. Because those trucks are huge going through there. Just giving you that heads up. They take up a lot of real estate, and that is a very, very narrow portion of Avenue C. My next thing is, I'm just going to pick really quick. You said that 26 businesses were surveyed. Is there a list of those 26 businesses?
We do have a list. I don't think we have it here with us.
Yeah, I just want to know who participated and who actually knew and was able to articulate what their feelings were. I know that there's a lot of deliveries that just go on Avenue C, and the street itself is. I made my feelings known about this in November. I just don't know why Avenue C was picked for this. This is a very tough street to put a protected bike lane on. It's been a very tough street to maneuver this kind of thing for years.
So could we get the list sent to us?
Yeah.
Sure. And just to kind of reiterate what Ogwin had said earlier on, the loading zones on Avenue C and themselves are difficult for us to make. We didn't have a lot of wiggle room really because of where the floating parking fits into the design, but the loading zones on the side streets, we have a little more room to work with. So if we can make adjustments afterwards if there are businesses that felt like they weren't heard or they have other needs. We can still have those discussions, and we'll be going back out, as Olga mentioned at the end of the presentation. We'll be doing more door-to-door outreach after this presentation with more detailed information about the project itself and what the changes are that are planned, and so we'll be able to have some of those conversations again as well.
Okay, go ahead, Susan, and then I'll ask something after that. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay. Well, just first of all, I want to ask if the list of the businesses could be sent to us, but I also wanted just to note in that area that there are a lot of kids. There's a development there of a couple buildings, a lot of street sidewalk people on the sidewalk there, and a lot of kids there. I mean, it's a particularly dense area, and I just want you to be aware because of the safety concerns.
This is all due to that market?
No, I'm talking about the Niger Developments there, which have gotten a lot of attention recently.
Yeah, the Niger Developments are actually across the street from Shop Fair on that picture. So they've had a lot of attention recently, good or bad, however you want to see that. That's what Susan is referring to. You said you're going to reach out to residents soon. Is that correct?
So we don't typically do like door-to-door outreach to residents. We do to businesses, and we like to work with the community board and other partners we do, that's not exactly true. We do our What's Happening Here flyers to residential buildings as well along the corridor.
Yeah, just
end up usually having more detailed conversations with businesses, but we do, if there are residential buildings, we will give the What's Happening Here flyers that do have the information to contact our office with questions.
Okay, because let me ask, I didn't see it in this presentation, but I know in the last presentation, there was the number of parking spots being lost, correct? Is that number changed in any way?
Not substantially, but you can add in and over. It's very similar, right?
Just because there are families who are in the neighborhood that rely on parking throughout the neighborhood in that area, and knowing that they're going to lose parking spots, they have to figure out what their plan B is. So I think they should at least get a lot of notification when that happens, especially when alternate street comes into effect and all that. I know a lot of families that park around here that live here because they can't afford the parking garages in their apartment buildings, and or if they even have. So just letting you know that. Does the committee have any other questions for DOT and the protected bike lane? Okay. You said the anticipation of the beginning is September. I mean, it's not September, the summer.
The spring, right? Late spring? Okay.
Right, yes.
Just
Like I mentioned, we still have a lot of coordination to do with the restaurants as well.
yes. Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing that list when you're able to get it to the office. So appreciate that. Once again, committee have any other questions? I didn't see any hands
Trevor
up.
has a question.
Sorry, who has a question?
Trevor. Who is
He's listed as co-host, so he can't raise his hand. All right.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Trevor. Go ahead, Trevor.
Well, thanks. I learned a lot, and I hope DOT understands the importance of talking to residents, because I learned a lot from Paul talking about his experience living here and his knowledge of the street. My question is very simple, though. For that first slide that you showed with the narrow street where you put the bike lanes on both sides and just street parking, just for my knowledge, if I'm dropping off my grandmother on that street, because I know there's a lot of issues with people parking in bike lanes, but where do I drop my grandmother off on the proposed design without blocking a bike lane? Do I just stop in the middle of the street? The first slide was fine.
Right.
Right.
I think, well, maybe the loading zones wouldn't necessarily be the best consideration, but like in this case, perhaps using side street or.
She's in a wheelchair though, so I really want to avoid dropping it off a side street in wheelchair and then having to deal with non-standard curb cuts and those issues. So if I just want to know the answer so I don't block a bike lane, because this street, I don't know who lives in the street, but it's going to be interesting. There's no legal place to drop someone off. So your recommendation is to either use a side street or just drop them off in the middle of the street.
Well, just to explain that, because there was parking existing on the curb, you probably wouldn't have been able to get directly to the curb anyway, given the fact.
Depends though.
So if there was a spot available, you might be able to. Right. So,
but
in that case, you are, it is a little bit tougher, and we would be asking you to go to a corner. And yeah.
Which is where the ramps are also. If you're using the wheelchair, the ramps are at the corners.
That's it.
Thanks, Trevor. I don't know if I'll just like before with the public advocate, I'll just take a few questions from the community if there are any. If not, I'll be ready to move on. I do see one hand. Okay. Wendy Brower.
Hi, my office is right around the corner from where Trevor was speaking about I'm on 3rd between C and D. That block also, my block has several services, including Ryan Nina, and there's many people in wheelchairs, walkers, etc. And I hope that space on the sidewalk is left open. Right now, there's a ton of scaffolding around and stuff. That's one question, but my bigger question, my bigger question really is, where's Houston Street? You talk about coming to, it's next steps. Is there any images about Houston Street, or is this only Avenue C tonight?
I meant to kind of clarify that at the beginning of the presentation. So we presented the full proposal last fall for both Houston and for Avenue C. The questions at the meeting were all around Avenue C, and the outreach about to the businesses and the loading zones and the open restaurants was all on Avenue C. So the Houston Street design is much more straightforward. It's very standard. We already have buffered bike lanes there, and it's really just like flipping the location of the bike lane and the parking lane. I don't know if we brought any images or if you have any specific questions.
Yeah,
The full presentation is available online as well from November, but happy to answer questions.
So a big question is what happens when you go south of Houston? I live on Rivington Street. Lots of people go across the bridge to Brooklyn. A lot of people go to the Lower East Side. How is this a plan that doesn't go below Houston address that?
Right. So for people who are, I guess, trying to access the Lower East Side, they could utilize Houston and some of the other streets like Allen Street to make that connection.
So last time, I believe we talked about it at the meeting you were talking about. Pitt Street came up as a two-way bike lane. I'm a proponent of Ridge Street as the southbound lane and a connector on the south side of Houston to it, but maybe I can go other ways, obviously, but I'm just really curious. There's a lot of bicyclers down here that also need safe passage.
I could speak a little bit to this because it's just given the amount of time and energy we have actually staffing. I'll go ahead and say that. You know, like we have to do what we can here. And I actually completely agree with you. We would love to look south of Houston, but at this point, you know, this was the thought. This is what we thought we could do this year. And we will continue to work with you and totally encourage you to work with us and talk to the community board about getting more stuff south of Houston, more infrastructure, to be more specific.
All right. I'm gonna thank you, Wendy, and thank for everybody for that question. Keep the questions limited to the Avenue C portion. I understand there's questions about going below Houston and other parts of the Lower East Side, but we're just literally talking about this specific portion of this project of Avenue C. So forgive me if I'm being a little bit rude or anything like that. I just want to keep a focus to that because that's what they came to present on today. And so take a few more questions. I saw Sophie's hand. Sophie, go right ahead.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everybody. Sophie Merowitz here. I live at the corner of 14th and C on the south side. And I also am one of the co-founders of the Avenue B Open Streets Community Volunteer Group. So my question is about the loading zones, and I'm wondering why or if they can't be used for drop-offs and pickups for hire vehicles as well, because to Trevor's point, I often have been riding that lane and somebody does pull over in the bike lane, you know, the sharrows, the faded paint lanes, whatever you want to call it. And somebody does pull over and I almost get doored or I'm forced to go into traffic, and that's extremely dangerous. So huge props to DOT and you guys for coming forward with this plan because it is long overdue. And I use Avenue C to get to work. And yeah, it would be awesome, I think, to have that sort of flexible loading zone concept, because I do understand that people need pickup and drop off, but I don't think doing it in the bike lane is the answer.
So that is the intent, or one of the intents of the loading zone. So there are no parking, so you can drop off and pick up. Of course, we know there are also like a lot of demand for residential deliveries and other uses. So it'll work itself out a little bit.
It'd be awesome to see like some communication with TLC, with Lyft, with like anybody who kind of may use those loading zones just to kind of offer that option. All right, thank you. I'm so excited for this plan. It is so crucial to me and all the delivery cyclists I see using C to preserve our lives and our ability to move freely in the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Let me see two more hands. I see Eric Weber. Am I saying that correct?
Yep, that's right. Hi, everybody. My wife and I live on 7th Street between C and D, so we're very excited to see this. We are a family that lives without a car. Our family is growing soon, so we're also thinking about how to safely get around with a child on the bike, and so really excited to see this. And yeah, thank you all DOT for doing all the work here. I know there's a ton of priorities that you all have to balance here. Like the one thing I will say is like, would love to see, I don't know, some creativity around the barriers in sort of the buffer zones. It's unfortunate, I know it's out of your all's control that the snow plow and street sweeper tail continues to kind of wag the dog in terms of the lane design. But if you do go over to 12th and 13th Street, you'll see like on the blocks where the buffer is only 3 feet wide or even narrower, the bike lane is basically a loading lane. Oftentimes during the middles of the day, like it's just wide enough for a FedEx truck to go in, so they get in there at the beginning of the block and then they park there. And so if there are creative treatments at the openings of blocks to potentially deter that kind of behavior, you know, I just would love to see something there, as much as you all have the ability to control some of the inputs. So thank you all again for coming.
Thank you, Eric. Horesh, right?
Horesh, yeah, thanks, Paul. Thank you, DOT. I praise you and salute you, and very thankful for your plan. It's a very solid plan with all the loading zone plan. Yeah, the only thing to add is that I hope you expand the neighborhood loading zones to the feeding protected bike lanes on 12th and 13th streets, because the same problems that you identified on C, that's going to happen, and you very wisely solve with this plan, are still happening there. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last comment, Samir?
Yeah, hi, Samir. Sorry, I joined a little bit late. I was cooking dinner after Ramadan for fasting. Not much to add, just saying this is awesome. I love to see it. Hopefully this will happen soon and it'll be a huge success. Thank you, DOT, for doing this.
A lot of praise. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna have to turn down the praise meter. And is there any other questions from the committee? All right. Yeah, once we get a list of the names, I think that'll be great. And thank you for coming on today and coming back with an update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we're moving. All right, agenda item number 4. Our colleague Trevor Holland is still on, right, Trev?
Correct. And just give me a moment to share my screen. This is actually the first time I've done this on this end as a presenter.
Let me do your big introduction first. No, that's important.
Sure, go ahead. If you want.
So yeah, let's just take a look at the agenda item. This is the draft reso I sent out last night. It's about South Street from Pike Slip to Rutgers Slip, changing the parking regulations, right, Trev? From bus parking alternate side to alternate side of street parking. Trevor's been pretty active on this and reaching out to DOT, and I know he's been trying to get it on our agenda for a little while now. So take it away, Trevor.
Okay, let me just share my screen and present this. This is going to be very quick. I was at the meeting when Michelle did it, so I took some of her skills, but however, I wasn't able to get a video portion for this. I couldn't figure that out in my quick, so this is concerning the area of South Street between Pike Slip actually, and Rutgers Slip. Once again, my name is Trevor Holland. I'm president of Tough LES and my resident association at Rutgers Tower. That's the building I live on. That's also the building that's on this particular street. Tough LES actually represents buildings that go from the Brooklyn Bridge up to Montgomery Street. I put together a small presentation. It will not take that much time. I know it's late and I'm probably the last one on the agenda. And I apologize in advance of my skills. They aren't as polished as I like to be, but we're going to get through this. And I know that this committee is the top committee of transportation in all of New York City. So I appreciate your hard work. Right now, the current street park regulations are no standing anytime, although that has expired. And previously, before the construction started, which was about 5 years ago, we had bus parking along this portion. Along this portion, there was a path mark. I'm sure many of you may remember the path mark. So it was deemed commercial. So we had bus parking. As of now, there's all residential buildings that line this entire stretch, including a number of affordable buildings, including Section 8 and apartment buildings that house the formerly homeless. However, this is problematic for the immediate neighborhood. Here you can see a typical day, although this is pre-pandemic, but this is a typical day of where buses line this portion of the street. These are all tour buses for Lower Manhattan. Some are for the bus, but the entire range of different buses park on the street. Some of them block the driveways or entrances to buildings. They pay no attention to the regulations. The portion that you see right now is not actually in the metered zone. It's actually behind my building. I've been trying to do something about this for almost a decade without much success. Calling 311 and having residents call 311 just has not worked. There is some enforcement, but most of them, if a police officer pulls up, they may pull off, but a lot of times they're just not ticketed. We've learned that the solution is not enforcement or having officers spend the time. The solution is proper planning and figuring out ways to discourage illegal bus parking. So another picture, and we have to deal with a lot of issues here with the buses because they all leave trash, they all dump urine. They all run their buses, especially during the summer, even though it may be 3 minutes on a cap for some buses. These are all types of buses and not just the typical tour buses. Right now, these are the buses that we call them intercity buses to be, that's the proper name for them, although some call them the Chinatown buses, and where they are parked right now is illegal. This is further down South Street from Rutgers going north towards Montgomery. The buildings on the left are all affordable. Across the street from that is the sanitation shed, Department of Fire Department or EMS location, and also Basketball City. So we get the full onslaught of traffic. It is nonstop. There is no break. And this area is actually illegal for them to park, but because it's a no standing, no parking, they take advantage of it because there is very little enforcement. And you can see that they're block driveways, and then they're an obvious pollution hazard for our neighborhood. I've said this many times before, this area is an environmental justice area and has one of the highest COVID rates in all of New York City. And we are trying to rethink how we view neighborhoods. I really get irritated when someone says something about ambient noise or pollution as if to say, well, there's already a lot of noise and pollution, what's a little more? And we only really say that in lower income neighborhoods as if to say, well, your baseline is already at a certain point. It won't hurt to put a few more buses in your particular neighborhood, even if they are illegally parking. The view from my window looking down, a larger problem we have is the MTA buses, because there is no enforcement of MTA buses. Try calling or filing complaint against the MTA buses, it will not happen. And these aren't the M9s or the M14s or the M22s. These are buses that make the pit stop before they go down to Wall Street and pick up people to take them to Long Island or Staten Island. This happens every day between the hours of 3 to 5. Keep in mind that on one side is a playground, or 2 playgrounds, and the other side will be the other side underneath the FDR is the BMCR project or the Coastal Resiliency Project, which will have a number of playgrounds. So the kids have to breathe this pollution in, and we have to deal with safety issues of walking along the street with a wall of buses. So what are we looking at? A combination of pollution, constant idling, a lack of respect for the pedestrian experience, traffic on South Street. We also feel this is an unfair burden on our neighborhood. This one section, I believe in all of CB3, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, is the only residential section that has to absorb every single bus that wants to park in this particular area. And I'm not just talking about the metered parking, I'm talking about the area on South Street, which does not have meters, but has a 7 to 7 p.m. or 8 to 6 requirement. As I mentioned before, there's lots of trash and urine, and there are children's playground in the areas. And please keep this in mind, and this is why it's important that this is an all residential area. The enforcement is not even working for the legal areas, and the events at Basketball City make the problem worse, although we've been lucky or spared the typical conventions or events that they have at Basketball City. We anticipate that will change as time goes on. So we're looking or trying to take advantage of a pause to make some simple planning adjustments. Let me see if I can go to a map view. This is the best I can do for video. Now, if you look here, this is Montgomery Street where this creative structure is. That's actually a water tunnel access. They put something fun on the roof that you wouldn't know unless you looked at Google Satellite. But you can see going forward, there's buses. This is just a typical Google Maps view where you see all these illegal buses parked. I can tell you half of them are running their engines. I'm just going to move forward to where there's other legal parking for buses, because we're not trying to take all of it away. We understand there's a need, but it's this is slowing down a bit. But this is the area from Pike Slip to Catherine where buses lined up, and there's a meter here. So there's plenty of parking for the meter. And this is also more of a commercial area. This is the Manhattan storage area right here where they line up to park. So we have all these buses, and it's not just the tour buses or MTA buses or intercity buses. There are also the smaller dollar vans that also park along here, although the area is not supposed to have those for parking. And the last time I examined this, there was some issue of whether parking or residential or car parking is allowed on South Street for alternate side, and indeed it is, because this is Smith Houses, and there is a line of this area is controlled by alternate sides of the street parking, and there are no buses on that particular street. So what's the solution? And this is I'm almost at the end of this, is to remove all metered bus parking on South Street between Rutgers and Pike Slip. That's a very small section. It did not, whoa, not yet. It does not affect the existing parking that occurs from Pike to Catherine, which has the Manhattan mini storage area. You can, keep that metered bus parking, although to be honest, I'd like to be able to get rid of a lot of the bus parking or layover areas, but just because of the pollution that it presents in our particular neighborhood. Proper planning works. We can ask for enforcement, but as you know, enforcement does not lead to actual solutions. It just leads to a bunch of calls to CB3 office and hundreds of calls to 311, some targeted enforcement, but it always comes back. As I mentioned before, South Street from Pike Slip north is all residential. There are no commercial buildings. It's completely residential. So we're asking for a simple change of the regulations from the bus zone extending from Pike to Rutgers Slip to alternate side of street parking, like is what already exists after Catherine Strip near Smith Houses. And also to re-examine the parking regulations on South Street from Rutgers Slip to Montgomery Street to convert that area entirely to alternate side of the street parking with sections for meters, non-buses, and loading zones, which are new to our district, but I think we're going to need them going forward. So we'd like an examination of that particular portion. But for the residential portion, we'd just like to get rid of the MTA and other buses which come and lay over for hours and run their buses and pollute our area. That's it. If you have any questions, I can attempt to answer them. I know that there's an existing draft of a resolution with the committee, but if there are any questions, I'm able to answer them.
Okay, before we think about the draft of the resolution, thank you for Trevor coming on that. It's a great presentation. Michelle, I know you had a question already, so I'm just gonna kick it off with you.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Trevor. I spend a lot of time down there, so I know what it looks like, and I'm 100% convinced of the problem, and I also appreciate the shout out for our shared traffic PowerPoint proclivities, but I guess I'm not convinced of the ASP solution. I think people on this committee know that I'm opposed to generally to adding parking, especially free parking. So I'm just wondering, I saw that you said like partial metered. Is there a reason why you're not advocating for like complete metered? Because ASP just means that people are gonna like park their cars there and it'll be there and then they'll idle when the street cleaner comes, like I see all over the Lower East Side. So that's my question.
Well, we've looked at different ways, and I can tell you right now that 7 a.m., 7 p.m. doesn't work. No standing doesn't work. 8 to 6 doesn't work. What we're trying to do is get rid of the buses. If there was a way to put residential meters, I don't think that's the worst idea, but we're really talking about a small stretch. It's half the block that has the bus parking. And the reason why half the block has the bus parking is there was previously a pathmark there. So it was a commercial area. Although I would have fought against that if I was as active as I was today, because that was 11 years ago or 12 years ago. So I guess the reasoning was, since it's a commercial building being pathmarked, to make that half of the block bus parking. With regards to the free parking, I understand, but also there's depending on what happens, at least 4,000 apartments that may come online within the next couple of years. And if there's not something that's done right away, we're going to run into problems. For the rest of the block, I would like to see some of the shared loading zones that were talked about earlier in the meeting. But for this particular resolution, I'm only focused on this half of the block. So it's not an entire block. It's just the only thing that works. And I know you discussed it at one of your previous meetings with regards to the body shop, but the only thing that works to deter illegal parking is alternate side of street parking. Nothing else works. And I've been here 23 years, never seen anything else work.
Thanks, because like basically it just means that there are cars there all the time and so no one can park, like idle, right? Is that the?
Well, most of the time, except during alternate side.
Right, but they're generally like idling and waiting and then they pull it back in. I've seen mostly.
It's all the time, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
David Gray.
I don't, excuse me, I am not familiar with how cars work in the city, but wouldn't muni parking, or maybe they don't do it the way, is there muni parking for standard sized vehicles only? Because that seems like it would have the same effect. And even if it's not, if standard sized vehicles are allowed to park in there, it's going to be hard to get a whole slot for buses.
Right now there's muni parking for buses. I don't know if there's another area for that in our district, but right now there's muni parking for buses. I can tell you right now, and I can ask DOT, that the buses don't pay that meter because they just sit in their buses and then they leave. We did a video a few years back to try and see how many buses actually fed the meter, and for a 6-hour period there was exactly 0. So I'm not totally
why
against.
Do you think that muni parking for vehicles won't be effective at preventing the buses?
I'm not saying that it won't. I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying for the rest of the block, I'd like to see muni parking for vehicles. I just think for this one section, to allow for alternate side of the street parking until DOT can look at the other area, which is the entire stretch from South to Montgomery, which is a bigger, I think, lift. And I think I'd really like to do more research with my residents, but this particular area is a half a block. So the lift that we're asking right now is a half a block. I don't mind meter parking. I think it provides some relief for people who come to visit and just want to stop. But with the buses, and we have not had a solution in 12 years, I think this is the only solution for half the block. Longer term, I'd like to see metered and loading areas, because I think that's critical. Because there's no loading areas along that block either.
Any other questions from the committee? Trevor, I didn't realize that when you mentioned MTA buses in the draft reso, I was literally thinking like the M22s and stuff like that. These are the express buses. These are the big boys that go all over the place. They go to the Bronx, they go down Staten Island, they go all over the place. So these are just like the tour buses. They're the same build, they're the same kind.
Right,
Uh,
all of them stop on South Street before going downtown in front of residential buildings, and all of them run their engines.
Right, is there a motion to bring the resolution to the floor? I hear a motion. Is that late? Okay. All right, is there a second? No second.
I will second it.
There we go. Thank you. All right. Wendy, do you have the draft resolution I sent out last night?
Yep.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second.
Pull it up.
And I see Jennifer is on the line, and I know I've been talking with Jennifer for nearly a decade about the rest of South Street. And we haven't been successful with the longer portion because I think that's a bigger lift, but we really would like to see, especially with all the traffic on South Street, a re-examination of the regulations that affect from Rutgers going north to Montgomery. An entire stretch needs to be re-examined with the school on the corner, with residential buildings, and with the a lot of times buildings aren't able to get rid of their, or to have their containers picked up by the trash companies because they're being blocked by buses.
Oh, could I get co-host?
Yeah, I think Michelle's working on it. Give her a second. Since Jennifer is on the line, Jennifer, I know you and Trevor have been talking about this for a while. What is DOT's opinion on this potential change up in this area?
I know there's a lot of history behind that metered bus parking. I know I already spoken to some of my folks about it. I don't know if that's something that we have to look further like into reviewing it, because I know there are several areas that have bus meter parking, and the reason why it was created was because of 9/11 at the time. I mean, a lot of that parking is down by the memorial, but they also indicated some additional areas right by this area, but it's not strictly for the 9/11 memorial buses to park up here, but also for other tour buses that come to this area. I think it's good that, at this point that we can definitely take another look at it, knowing that, before we couldn't really look at it because of construction. And now that's completed, this is something that we probably could take another look and also re-examine the spaces for it. I mean, knowing that it's only half a block, I see this potential. I just don't know if that's something that's going to be a decision that's going to be made by senior management on it, because they're going to have to also look at the other spaces that we do have meter parking.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Let's start taking a look at this. I think the first change I want to make is in the MTA buses line. I want us to emphasize that these are the express buses, and so they're causing. This is not just our regular metro regular buses that we have throughout the city. I want us to just put everything as express buses, because those are heavy lifters and they're causing more than your average level of pollution and anything like that. So I think it's important to note that.
It's also interesting to know, I forgot to mention it, and Jennifer mentioned it again, that this is back in when they established this for 9/11 tour bus area. We didn't really have the entire tour bus picture that we have right now. But I understand the need, but I don't really understand how this neighborhood became a bus depot for the tour buses going for visitors to 9/11 Memorial and Museum, once again dumping that type of pollution in this particular neighborhood. This is a small step, and I understand David and Michelle's concern. That's why we're really just sticking to half a block. Maybe in a few years when I'm done with the community board, we can finally get the rest of that street converted. But right now we're just looking at half a block.
Susan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to also mention, I remember at the meeting back in 2011 when they created these bus stops. So this was because of the opening of the 9/11 memorial. They expected all these buses to come in and they needed a place to put them. And earlier, Trevor referred to this as an environmental justice area. So it's not, I wasn't aware when we did the draft for the reso but this really is what you might call an environmental justice area, serving as parking for a much richer area.
And I'd like to ask Jennifer if they surveyed any locations in Battery Park City for a potential location for metered bus parking.
And I believe I was at that meeting and I don't think they did.
Okay, thank you.
The bus parking for 911 is pretty much on West Street and also on Barclay. And I believe there might be another location that's on South, but it's further south of the Brooklyn Bridge. Like there's a lot of other bus parking that's on South Street as it is. But I think those will definitely remain because
they're not residential.
Further up, yeah.
This
And
is
I know up
residential.
here,
Yeah.
Yep.
David, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, what does the last whereas mean? I don't understand what it's saying. Like they are currently reviewing it and they are going to add a resolution from CB3 to the review process. What does the last part mean?
Yeah, so DOT has said, if, you know, when they were reviewing this when Trevor was asking for this, DOT said, we are in the process of reviewing, there are levels of review. And if we get a resolution from CB3, that will become part of the review process.
Okay, so it'll be additional information that they would be reviewing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Susan, you mentioned some language. I'm just trying to figure out if we want to add a whereas regarding the environmental justice area.
I think it wouldn't hurt maybe right before the last therefore it be resolved to say, whereas, you know, according to New York City Department of Health, this is an environmental justice area, which is now being, it's hard to do it right offhand, which is now serving as a parking lot for another, you know, wealthier area.
If we're going to put that whereas in, let's put it in right after that. Whereas both the tour buses and NT Express, that right after that whereas and right before the whereas of residents of the area.
And we could, you know, try and, you know, if we can try and improve the language a little bit, we can always ask for, you know, changes from the floor at the full board meeting to, you know.
Am I moving this one?
No, you're not, I'm not moving. We're adding a whereas.
Oh, okay,
so
gotcha. Right here.
Yeah, right there. Okay. Could you repeat that again, Susan or Trevor?
Whereas, Trevor can help, whereas this area is designated as an environmental justice area by the New York City Department of Health. Is that correct, Trevor?
Correct.
New York City Department of Health. And is being used to serve as a parking lot for the wealthier, I don't want to say neighboring neighborhood.
Neighboring.
Is there a better way to say that, perhaps? I see David has his hand raised, and I wonder if he has some language.
I'm actually thinking about another one, but now that we're doing this, I just Googled a bit and I don't find the words environmental justice area, NYC Department of Health on the internet. So is there really such a designation, or is it called something
Susan
else?
asked me the same question, and
yeah,
we checked it out for another resolution for parks, and I felt the same way. It is. They have a
it
map.
was just added. It's on DOE.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull up the link. And
I looked at the map.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a good argument to put in here. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't making something up.
No.
That maybe there's a different word for environmental justice area. 'Cause I
That's
really
what
would have
it's called,
expected
though.
to find, okay,
It's called an.
sounds good.
You want to use the word communities at the end?
Yeah,
Wealthy-
neighboring
wealthy
community, for the
neighboring-
wealthier neighboring community.
With wealthier adjacent neighborhood, maybe?
For the wealthier neighboring community.
Okay.
David, you said you wanted to add something else?
Well, I do want to propose an amendment to switch the street side, alternate side parking to muni meter vehicle parking. But first, so I want to amend that, but then I also wanted to speak to it to ask DOT, is there such a designation? I mean, there is clearly one to designate for muni parking for buses and these larger vans. I think it would be as effective, and I also do not want to create free street side parking anymore. So can we make it pay parking and have it be for vehicles as opposed to buses?
I'd like to
That's
hear Jennifer.
possible. That's possible.
Okay, can we put that as first? Because I don't want to limit, and I don't want DOT to say, well, we can't do metered. So language would say a priority or to look at vehicle metered.
Right, to metered parking for vehicles instead
Right.
of buses. So where the from is correct because it's to where it says where it says alternate side parking regulations. I would propose that we amend to say metered parking for vehicles that would not include buses.
That would not include buses?
Right, that would not allow buses or include one or the other. Probably not allow. Would that do it? I'm not looking for a way around what you're trying to do, Trevor, but since there is a way to designate it, I think that this will be effective.
No, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just trying to, because it's been over a decade, whatever DOT, if it's metered or vehicles, that's the only thing that works. But I don't want DOT to, I don't want DOT to say, well, we can't do metered. We can do, we have to, I want to give them that option also.
Except, however, we're talking about environmental justice, and to put in municipal muni meters on that stretch of parking now without outreach to the community, a community that has, as you mentioned, Trevor, affordable housing and public housing over there. It's, I think, 90%, if not more, other than the Excel building. Without any outreach, I think to do that right now wouldn't be right, quite frankly. And as Trevor mentioned, as part of the larger discussion about parking in the rest of the stretches down there, it certainly should be part of the discussion with outreach to the community. But to ask for muni parking meter parking now for those residents, I don't think is the right thing to do.
We're actually adding parking. We are not removing parking for anyone to use, and it is on the agenda. So I don't think that we need to do anything like pause this for more outreach.
No, it's not that you're not adding parking. You are now charging parking by the hour. And if the most part, that parking down there, the residents down there, you're going to be asking them to come now and come down every hour and a half or 2 hours to pay for muni parking, as opposed to alternate side, which is what Trevor originally asked for. I don't think that's right to do at this point.
Don't they all have their own parking? Don't all the buildings already have parking?
No, no, not by any means.
Okay.
And the parking garage is one of the highest, not that it matters. In the city, it's $1,200 a month to park a month.
Wow.
I don't know if there's a higher place in all of Manhattan than this area because of the lack of parking. But I have to push back a little bit and agree with Lee on that, because I will say that in discussions with the residential buildings and on the air, we did talk about alternate side. I understand the sort of need to not provide new parking, but we're really talking about half a block. I think it probably would have to stay as alternate side. Otherwise, we'd have to go back and think about this. And that area has already, and Jennifer can attest to this, it's already done. That no parking sign for construction is expired as of December. So I think we need to move a little quickly on this. This is why I'm trying to pressure folks, but I have to agree with Lee on that. I hope other committee members agree, because it does become a burden for people who live in this area that we didn't discuss as the community group I belong to.
All right, so on this portion, on this specific change amendment, how does the committee feel about leaving the metered parking in or the alternate side parking? I can go one by one. You can tell me what you would rather have it. David, I'm gonna start with you. David, you clearly want this in.
Yeah, I would like it to be metered.
Michelle?
Same, but I want to ask Trevor a question, because this is not existing parking for people. During your community outreach, was there a request for more parking, or was the request to your, which is most of what your presentation was, which was that it was to keep the idling buses out of that space?
If you've been to any of the True Bridges meetings for traffic planning and issues, I mean, after the mega tower proposal, the only thing that DOT came up with was to adjust the lights by 3 or 4 milliseconds, and that would control all the issues. Like it or don't like it, the number one issue for this area is parking. And I understand that folks don't like it, that's their personal opinion, but if you talk to the residents in this area, because this is their neighborhood, they are going to tell you parking is number one. That's just the way it is. Most of the folks in this area do not ride bikes. Most of these folks in this area either use some type of car service, public transportation, or they drive in. And I understand the need to discourage that, but that is the number one concern for this area above anything else. And number two is a supermarket.
You mean wanting more parking?
Wanting more parking. If you went to any of those meetings, that's what people talked about. And I this is the reason why I sort of have to hold firm here, primarily because we have to think about what residents want and not what people who think they know the city or think they know the residents want. I mean, the super bike lane that's across the street is fine for folks who come through that particular neighborhood, but we get more complaints from the seniors who cannot cross the street because there's no way to safely cross without running into someone who's going 26 miles an hour and refuses to stop in those bike lanes. And I get it, I understand it, but that is the concern for this particular neighborhood.
Hey, Paul, can I ask, it'd be more efficient if you asked if there needed to be more debate and then just took a vote on the amendment.
Yeah,
This is going back and forth, and okay.
Yeah, let's take a vote on the amendment. So this specific amendment, to leave metered parking in, yes or no? All right, to leave metered parking in, because that's what we see on the screen. Yes or no? David Crane?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Lee?
No.
Wendy? Wendy, I didn't hear you. Yes or no?
Hello? Hello? Yes.
To leave metered parking in, yes. Who else is on? There's no Ellen tonight. Do I see it? Tariq stepped off, correct?
Correct.
No, Felicia, and Felicia's not on. So that's 3. I'm gonna vote with no. I actually would rather have alternate side in there. So that's 3-2, right? All right, so it's staying in. Metered parking for vehicles that would not include buses, staying in. This could always change at full board, but that'll stay in. Is there any way I could make an amendment for maybe perhaps adding a review of potential added alternate side parking into that final resolve clause, like adding it on. Maybe find a way to combine both, or to look at either option. That DOT looks at either option.
If this is going to stay the way, I would prefer to see that, because I just don't want to put DOT in a box and they say, no, we can't do metered parking. Alternate side is pretty easy to do because it's already existing further up north in front of a residential building. Also, there are no meters along this particular street. There's no meters along Smith houses. There's no meters further south. So putting metered parking is going to be a big change. I understand it's already passed. I just think that we're going to create a big problem here. And now I'm going to have to go to full board and do this because it's just a little different. I understand it, but if you could propose some language that says either or and to review it for alternate side, it might be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's.
Go ahead and come up with something, Paul, but I'm going to say that this is not going to block DOT. If DOT find they can't do it, they will put in something else. The thrust of the whole thing was the buses, the diesel pollution, being unsafe. So anyway, that's what I believe.
Yeah, and perhaps I didn't emphasize that we're really talking about a residential area and just moving the buses from that half of the block and preventing that, but understood.
Susan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, would it be helpful to say metered parking for vehicles, or if that is not possible, alternate side, to address Trevor's concerns about not just, either metered parking or buses?
Can you say that language again so it can be typed in?
So let me make that amendment. So we're keeping this as is, and now I'm making another amendment to
after vehicles would be, or if that is not possible.
Or if it's not possible to look at.
To review alternate side parking for the area. No, it'd be after.
After the vehicle?
I think it'd be better after vehicles.
Okay.
After parking for vehicles.
Yeah. Or if that is not possible, to review alternate side of the street parking for that block.
And then this is a little awkward.
Yeah, hold on.
How about afterwards?
That would not include buses, would be in front of the or.
Yes, correct.
The whole or clause was intended to go at the very end.
Correct. Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Oh, thanks.
Therefore be it resolved, the Community Board 3 supports residents' request to change the regulations from South Street from Pike Street to Rutgers Slip from metered bus parking and no standing except for buses to metered parking for vehicles that would not include buses, or if that is not possible, to review alternate side parking for that block. So I want to bring this new version of this of the resolve clause to a vote.
And to be clear, we're voting on the amendment. There could be further amendments. I heard Trevor say earlier it's already passed. The resolution has not passed.
It was just the amendment, the initial. Your change, David, had passed. The resolution had passed, and then I'm offering the new language.
Right. I was just clarifying for others because I think Trevor may have believed that we had already passed the resolution, and that had.
No, I was only talking about this particular portion of the amendment.
Thanks.
So
may I ask a question?
Sure,
Jennifer.
Go ahead.
I want to ask, when you're asking for meter parking for vehicles, you're talking about only passenger vehicles and not commercial vehicles, right?
Correct.
Okay, we should put the word passenger in front.
Either that or you put in the non-commercial vehicles. Meter parking
that-
for non-commercial vehicles.
Would that take care of the buses too?
Yeah, buses are commercial.
Non-commercial vehicles would be pretty much passenger vehicles.
So if we just,
That would be the
So
Right.
let's do
So-
that next. Let's clean up that next, but we will add the word non-commercial in front of vehicles next.
So let me get a vote on this change, on this amendment. I vote yes on this change. David Craig.
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
Wendy.
Yes.
Lee.
No.
All right. Am I missing anybody?
You.
No, I said yes at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Good try. I saved myself for last on the last one. I started on this one.
So another amendment is to stick the word non-commercial in front of vehicles, which I assume is going to be a friendly amendment, and you might be able to say without objection.
Any objection to the to that phrase? Not hearing anything, put it in. Susan, you still have your hand up? Or was that from before?
No, I'm sorry. I'll lower it.
Okay. I thought you were just giving me a high five. Thank you. Appreciate it.
do you still need, that does not include buses if non-commercial, does non-commercial take care of that bucket?
Probably does, but we can
Rather-
tinker for a while on this.
I'd
It's a little
rather just say
awkward,
that.
but I think it does the trick.
I'd rather just leave it in, just so be safe. All right. Trevor, I did have one question. You mentioned was it Pike Slip or Pike Street?
Pike Slip.
So we got
Pike goes from Pike Slip to Pike Street to Allen. So
is
that portion.
is that correct right there on that, or do we have to change it to Pike Slip?
Pike Slip, sorry.
So friendly amendment, Pike Slip. Any objections?
Probably is in the first paragraph also.
Let's see. Let's scroll up.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Any other amendments, friendly or not?
No, but I will say I had been struggling trying to remember how we originally established this, and the two things that I learned, that it wasn't residential at the time. I somehow forgot this is the location, but also what Jennifer had said, and I remember voting for it because we were, I don't know, everyone was just so terrified that buses were going to be flooding, and we had to create something. And it was just a bad situation, and I felt badly that we did it, but I also didn't feel like we had a choice back then. Probably no point in adding this verbiage in here. Yeah, I'm not interested in proposing it.
Okay. All right. Any other amendments? We're good. All right, let's get a vote on this resolution. Wendy, you can call that one out.
Okay. Paul Rango,
Yes.
Michelle Cooper-Smith,
Yes.
Wendy Lee, yes. Lee Berman,
No.
David Crane,
Yes.
Felicia's not here. Ellen, still not here.
No, Alan didn't come out today.
And Tariq.
He left already.
Okay. So that
All right.
will be 4
Resolution.
yeses and 1 no.
I guess what I was trying to say earlier and it didn't come out right, or all of it didn't come out. We passed it because they didn't yet have the underground parking at the World Trade Center, their area, and there was, and it was almost like maybe it was supposed to have been temporary, and we just never revisited it. And that kind of thing just happens, which is, unfortunate that it took us 10 years to revisit something that became obsolete pretty quickly. In fact, it became very quickly clear that nobody's interested in arriving by vehicles to go down to the World Trade Center. But there you have it. We did it almost as an emergency measure because there was no parking and everyone thought there were going to be 500, buses a day. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right, so that resolution passes. Thank you. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you. And I dropped in the environmental justice link to the host if you want to check it out. She can distribute it to everyone.
Thanks. All right, Trevor, thanks for coming on tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right, so it snuck in as an agenda item, but not really. We have something called committee goals for this year. Something that our chair has been talking about, the office has been talking about for a little bit. Susan, you want to just go into a little bit about committee goals, and then I'll, take over from there.
Sure. I think David will remember, and I don't remember if Trevor was around then or not. When Scott was borough president, all the community boards had to do annual reports that included committee goals. And they were simple goals. There were only a few of them. It wasn't, this very complex issue. But I think they tended to focus the committees on what they wanted to be doing. And then the following year, when creating new goals, also analyzed whether they had been successful for their previous goals. So I don't know if that's helpful. But it was just basically to have the committee plan and focus what they wanted to be spending their time on.
I think our committee goal is to spend time planning our vacations. Are we good? We're good off that? Does that work? No. Oh, damn.
I don't get to vacation.
I was trying. I was hoping everybody get vaccinated and we could all go. We could all go to Las Vegas together. I don't know. Anyway, but I was at another committee the other night, and I was hearing the way the goals were coming out, and I figured, our committee's been very focused on open streets the past year. Like that's kind of been our bread and butter. We always have some version of it on our agenda, whether it's open streets, restaurants, open restaurants. There's usually something that says open on our agenda every month. So I think that's part of what our goals are. Wendy, if you have just a blank Word document to pull up, or just type some of these down, we can focus on that, please. I'm thinking just continued oversight of anything open restaurants, open streets restaurants programs, and continuing to advocate for the community on any of these issues. I'm not sure how to exactly word that as a committee goal for the year, but our continued oversight and our continued advocacy for the community on these specific issues. Yeah, David, go ahead.
How about actually, I think you said it earlier with the public advocates representative. As they roll out the new program, so as they roll out the permanent status, that we want the regulations, we want clear regulations or something along those lines. I think our goal should be perhaps that as it rolls out, that we achieve, that we succeed in making the regulatory structure suitable. We succeed in forcing them to do a suitable regulatory structure. That could be the goal. And then what you have here is one of the steps toward that. We had a pretty good format May Lee had for our committee, and it was, what is the goal, and then what are steps toward that goal. But I kind of like the idea of something that's achievable and could be concretely stated, and that is to make sure that suitable regulatory structure is created by the time the open restaurant program is permanent. Open Streets program?
Yeah, I think it's open restaurants. I think it's the open restaurants program.
Okay.
So, okay,
Restaurants program
there you go. That's number one. Let's put that in, Wendy. David, can you repeat that? Because you just said it a lot better than I could. We'll make that number.
Succeed in ensure that a suitable regulatory structure is in place before the open restaurants program becomes permanent. That's a great goal. I mean, if we can do it, you know, I mean, I'm sure it's a great goal in terms of being achievable, but it would be a great thing. And it's something for us, if you re-examine goals, you can be like, well, how can we do something to further the goal? Anyway, that is goal, and the continuing to advocate, I would say, is like A underneath one, if you want to, do that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I was just thinking out loud, but thank you for breaking it down for me. I couldn't remember that far back into the meeting time. Is there any other steps I had? Right now, all we can do is advocate and put items on the agenda that address the structure, like us bringing in the public advocate's office was one thing today, right?
That document, the February resolution, are there things we could do with that we haven't already? I think we used it as testimony already, right? Is that over?
There's a lot, there's going to be, if things happen the way they should, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for input. But I would also say you don't need, as part of this, the steps under the goal.
Right, we just need the goals today, basically, to submit.
I mean, it might be something that you want to do later when you think about how you're going to achieve it.
Okay. All right, 2. Where's Michelle? Michelle, I know it is the protected bike lanes. So you were talking about it the other.
Did I make it obvious enough?
No.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think we probably have discussed this a lot as well, that we have a lot of bike lanes in our district, but many of them are not suitably protected. So I think it like endangers everyone, not just cyclists. It endangers pedestrians, it endangers drivers, it endangers cyclists as well, of course. I mentioned, I think like East 12th Street and East 13th Street have that, and another community member mentioned that. I, of course, am most familiar with Clinton Street because that's where I live, or near where I live. And I think that's something that we could work on in the coming years, advocating for more protected bike lanes and renovations or improvements to existing bike lanes, even if they're not protections. Like the situation at the bottom of the Williamsburg Bridge is like really a disaster, if only because the paint has come off. More signage. So I don't know if we want to say like sort of like improvements to the existing bike lanes in the district, something like that.
Susan, you have your hand up, or?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Just improvements to the existing protected bike lane.
Well, I wouldn't say to the existing bike lanes in our districts, like including but not limited to like protections, additional signage, like education. I think a lot of problems about bike lanes comes from like a lack of education for everyone. Like cyclists feel like they need to like make their space on the road. And I think that's partially because we've forced them to. If we can, have additional signage about what the rules are and more delineation of space. I mean, I can't tell you how many times at the base of the Williamsburg Bridge, like a pedestrian is standing in the bike lane, and that's just not, when they have the right of way. It's just, we need more, I think, attention paid to it. And especially given COVID, there's such an explosion of bike riding in the city. Like, I think it's important. We heard that from many community members tonight.
So improvements to the existing bike lanes.
And creation of more of new protected. I would put that right with number 2.
Yeah, I would put, yeah.
And existing bike lanes and creation of new protected bike lanes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. All right. Number 3, Loading zones. How do we say that? Was it the creation of and pinpointing the parts of the district that really should have the commercial loading zones? Am I saying that correctly?
Creating and designating, maybe?
I didn't hear Wendy, but we don't even have a plan. I mean, work with DOT to create a plan.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be something, right? This has been a forever thing. So it's like, what can we do to build momentum toward this? And what is it that we want to achieve? They're almost two different things.
Okay.
Working with the DOT and creating, I mean, we really haven't got their attention yet.
Well, I
So
think they're going to come next month with the neighborhood loading zones, which I don't even really know what they are.
That's very interesting, and they sprung them on us just now, and I was like, wow, no parking. How does that help the FedEx truck? They can't park. So it'll be good to see that presentation. Still, what is the goal here? I would like to see. It needs to be a comprehensive. Whatever we do should be, if at all possible, comprehensive. For all parts of the district. It's going to be different in different parts of the district.
Right. Maybe work with DOT, not just in creating loading zones, but pinpointing which parts of the district should have them.
Designating, maybe?
Designate. There you go. Designating.
Residential and commercial loading zones?
Well, we don't know.
We don't
know what a neighborhood loading zone is yet. And it may encompass what you just said, or may not.
So it's called neighborhood loading zones, right? That's what.
Yeah, I mean,
it's being
that's just
called.
something to explore. It seems to be what the city has come up with, but we don't really know what they are.
They distinguished two types tonight in that presentation. There was like a bullet points: commercial loading zone, neighborhood loading zone. I think we should be a little vague here. But we do need to, I don't think it's not work with DOT in creating, designating. It is, I don't know exactly, but we want to get them to establish these, or at least to establish a plan. We want to get them to do the planning to establish suitable loading zones. I mean, what was our language in our district needs on this?
I don't know.
Would that be helpful?
Could we say in creating a loading zone plan for Community Board 3?
I like that. Instead of designating and creating a loading zone plan for CB3. Yeah, but get rid of the word designating, I think.
That should do it.
I like it. Yeah, I like it. This is a concrete thing, and it's good luck with it.
We need to try. It's really become an increasingly huge problem.
I know.
So is that enough?
Yeah. Now on number 2, I also think that, can we examine that just a little bit? I mean, I totally support it, but can we examine it for, is this an achievable goal that would be a substantial accomplishment? Generally, well, here's an example. Many years ago, like 20 years ago, we established a goal in the committee to create a complete north-south and east-west bike lane through the district that would connect all of that would connect to the greenway and the parks and bridges and existing bike infrastructure. I mean, it was almost exactly those words in some other jumble, but it was really concrete. Now you can tell that was the days before there was literally any bike lanes. It took us many years to do it, but we see it as something really concrete. This is good though.
You want to leave it as is, or change?
Well, I don't know what else to propose it to, but I would have our time looking back in the next year and say, did we achieve the goal?
it's almost like two goals in one. Let's improve the existing bike lanes and then create new ones as well. Roll into
Well,
one. I don't know.
It's all about safety. I mean, it's all about safety for bike lanes.
They're both almost like two ways of saying the same thing. I mean, a protected bike lane is a technical description. And approving existing bike lanes, there may not be room to put in a protected lane. Protected bike lanes are much better. You know, it has become so crowded with bikes now that there's really not enough room even in some of the existing protected lanes. The existing bike infrastructure is starting to become overwhelmed because with bikes. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how I can. Yeah, I don't know if I want to change it. Maybe we just.
No, me either. I can't see a way to change it. I don't think these are two different things, though. These are complementary things talking about.
Right. Okay. No. I get it. All right. Those are three pretty big goals. Does anybody want to add anything else? Three's a nice number. Let everybody know. So.
There are certainly big issues in the district that didn't make the list. I'm not saying every big issue has to.
Well, it's a list that's still growing. If you want to add something, this would be
That's why
the
we
time
have,
to
don't
add.
we have district needs already? That's what our district needs are.
Correct. We're trying to list the things that we intend to try to make real progress on this year.
Yeah, this is where it's different.
It's not a laundry list of all the things that we are concerned about.
We're not taking every district need and putting it onto our goal sheet. This is what can we do now in this next few months, year, what we have left.
Say it's a lot of work. What you have right there right now is a tremendous amount of work, I think.
I'm unclear how we would do number 2. Most of these things come to us as proposals. Are we thinking that we would advocate for something new? Like
CB2 does that a lot.
They do.
Yeah.
So I know they do, and that might be why they've been so successful. So are we considering doing that? Education signage modulation space. This doesn't sound like a step that we can take, for instance. Are there examples of kinds of things maybe?
Or if you can give an example of what CB2 does when you mentioned that they do a lot of it.
Well, I mean, I'll say even what you're looking at Avenue C, that came from the community. That didn't come from DOT. That came from the community who said to DOT, we want you to do this. They went to elected officials, said, we want you to support us. So it would be something like that, but coming from the community board.
There was a massive redesign of CB2. Many intersections were completely redone, especially over on the west side. Now, I'm pretty sure they hired Sam Schwartz or someone to come up with a proposal, but that came out of the community board.
I don't think they hired anyone. I think Shirley did that.
Oh my God, Shirley is much, well, sure, okay. I was thinking Honey for a second. Shirley, well, I'm more impressed with Shirley than I was before, if that's the case.
Yeah, I think they did. I think the community and the board kind of came up with that. I'm sure they did not hire anyone.
Well, it got done. And money helps, I'm sure.
All right. No, yeah, I think let's just stick with these three. These are big monsters right here, especially number 1, because that's coming up soon, especially with September and rolling around quicker than we anticipate. Is there anything else? I think we're good. We good on this? Does the committee agree with these goals? We good with this?
Looks
No
good.
objections? No objections? No objections. David, Lee, I see your head shaking, so good. Wendy just said no. Michelle, I can't tell if the map is shaking its head. Okay, great. You got the thumbs up. All right, cool. All right, I'm cool with it. You're all cool with it. I think it's time to close out the night. Yeah, Wendy, let's do final attendance roll call, and then we can adjourn this thing.
Okay, Paul Rango,
Yes.
Michelle Cooper-Smith,
Yes.
Wendy Lee, yes. Lee Berman,
Yes.
David Crane,
Yes.
and I believe Felicia, Ellen, and Tariq are still out.
Yeah, just call them out. Just
Felicia Cruikshank,
nope, she's not here.
Ellen Lowe,
Not here.
and Tariq Ramos.
Not here.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We did that. Oh, it's 9 o'clock. 2.5, guys. 2.5. All right. I'll see everybody at full board. Have a good couple weeks.